Well, hello everybody. Today we are making cheese and spinach pastries or cheese and spinach triangles. So if you don't like cheese or if you don't like spinach, there's all sorts of things that you can replace those ingredients for. And I love cheese and spinach together, especially with feta cheese. But the beauty about this recipe is that you can swap it out and just keep it as tasty cheese, or you can put all sorts of bits and pieces. You can put mushrooms in there, you can put leftover spaghetti bolognese, all sorts of different things. All right, so let's get into the cooking.
Here we've got our recipe here. So we've got cheese and spinach triangles. Prep time is about 30 minutes. Cook time is 20 minutes. But I think you might even get away with making it a little bit shorter than that. Now, on every single recipe, you'll see that we've got the red arrows, and the red arrows is where you need to ask for help. So, or if you're a parent watching this with your child, you just probably need to show a little bit extra supervision on this bit. So there's about 3 points on this recipe. Okay, now before we start, we talk about our 5 safety tips every single recipe. So first thing is wash your hands. Keep your hands away from your nose and your mouth. Cough and sneeze into your elbow. Speak nicely about food and keep your utensils pointing downwards. Fantastic. Now you will see that I've got all of my ingredients together, and over here I've got my utensils all together. So the reason that I do that is to make my life nice and easy, so that if I'm looking for a utensil, I know that it's not going to be in my ingredients section. So we always put our utensils or the equipment in one spot, and then we keep our ingredients all together. Great. I'm just going to move them out of the way just so that you know that they are there. Excellent. So we're going to read through our ingredients, read through the equipment, and then we're going to start cooking. So we're going to read the ingredients, and all we're doing here is not worrying about how much there is, but what we're going to do is just check that we've got everything on our workbench, because what we don't want to do is be running around and trying to, running from the fridge to the cupboard, back to the workbench. So we just try to do all that at the beginning, all the prep work, and then we'll get into it. Beautiful. You will need some puff pastry. You'll need some olive oil. You'll need some tasty cheese. You'll need some spinach if you're using it. And you can use fresh spinach or frozen spinach. Some feta cheese, an egg, some salt, some nutmeg, and some sesame seeds. If you don't have sesame seeds, you can use poppy seeds. You can even use chia seeds if you've got them. Great. Now, our equipment, you need measuring cups and spoons. You'll need a wooden spoon. You need a spatula, a knife, an oil brush. If you don't have an oil brush like that, you can just use paper towel. You'll need a baking tray with some baking paper, an oven mitt, and a cooling rack. Great. All right. Now, at the beginning of every recipe, we always do the preparation work before we start. So that's why we double check our ingredients, but also what we're going to do is we're going to prep the things that we are cooking with. I've got a baking tray, and I've got some baking paper. Now, you might find that you'll need a couple of trays. And what we want to make sure is that our baking paper fits our tray. Because what we don't want to happen is for our baking paper to flop over onto our beautiful pastries in the cooking process. And that can sometimes happen if we're using a fan in the oven. Once you've done that, pop that to the side because you're not going to need that for a while. So we're also going to turn on we're going to preheat our oven to 180 degrees. Make sure that you turn your oven onto the right setting. So it might be fan forced or fan bake. That will give you the right temperature to cook our beautiful pastries. Beautiful. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, if you are using frozen spinach, you'll just need to squeeze the water out of that. If you've got fresh spinach like I've got, you might need to either snip it up with a knife, because sometimes it's easier to snip things like leaves or herbs with a knife. I'm just going to very, very carefully just make my spinach just a little bit smaller. When we cook our spinach, it's going to wilt down. So wilting means that all the liquid goes out of it and that it sort of flops down. So we start with this nice big bowl of spinach, but when it wilts down, it might be all the way flat on the bottom. All right, so we've got our spinach here, and we're going to add 1 cup of tasty cheese. So you're going to measure 1 cup of tasty cheese, and then you're going to add 250 grams of feta cheese. Now you can see that I've cut mine into little cubes. You can make it smaller than that. I've used Greek feta because I like it because it's a little bit more solid. And I'm just making sure that it all breaks up. Great. Now feta cheese is nice and salty. And the beautiful thing when we cook it with tasty cheese is that all the flavors go in together. So beautiful. So I'm just breaking it up to a little bit smaller pieces. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is add some salt. So a pinch of salt is about 1/8 of a teaspoon. 1/8 of a teaspoon. So if you've got your measuring spoon, if you've got your measuring spoons and you've got a 1/4 teaspoon, you only want to fill it up about halfway because the cheese is salty and the feta is salty, but we do want to just make sure that we add enough to it so that we've got enough flavour. So 1/8 of a teaspoon, because if we measure a pinch, what I find is that if you are 6, your pinch is going to be a whole lot smaller than if you are 14. So I think that if we measure it accurately, we get a better result. And the next thing is I want you to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Now, you don't have to add this. It smells amazing. So make sure that you smell it before you pop it in, but it's only going to give a little bit of a flavour. When we add it to everything else, it becomes a team food. Excellent. Then the next thing that we're going to do is just grab our egg. Now, when we mix our egg, so I used that bowl before, and so I'm just going to reuse it for something else. Now, I don't crack my egg on the side of the bowl because I find that there's too much risk on it and it ends up getting all over my board. So what I do is I give it a little tap on the board, and we're using the tap and crack method. Tap and crack. So I've tapped it and there's a little hole there, but I can take my egg and move it around. So tap, and then I crack it open. Now, I never add an egg straight into my mixing bowl because if we if we break a little bit of egg and we get the egg shell into this bowl, it's so much easier to just use half of the egg shell and try to fish it out. But if we add it into here and we get a little bit of shell into the big mixing bowl, it's so much more difficult. So I always pop it into a little bowl and then I'll add it. Oops, I should have whisked it, but that's okay. If you want to whisk yours first, all right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to mix all of those ingredients together. Now, if you've used frozen spinach, you'll find that your mixture doesn't look quite as full, but we're all going to end up with the same result. So you can see that I've got one hand on my bowl and one hand is using the fork, or you can use a wooden spoon. And what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that all of the egg is getting mixed through the ingredients. So what we don't want to do is just pat. What we're doing is going all the way to the bottom and taking the mixture from the bottom, turning it over. Great. So tapping, I've seen people try to like this. We really want to get in there and really mix it through so that you can see that everything is a little bit wet. And if you can see that, and you've gone to the bottom of your bowl several times, that is what we're after. And then once you've done that, then we're going to pop that at the side. And if there's any little extra bits on your board, just add them to the bowl. Pop it at the side. Now, if your board is a little bit dirty, you might need to just give it a nice little wipe down. Great, you'll find that cleaning is very much part of cooking. Beautiful. All right, now we are at step 6. So we're going to take a piece of pastry. Right, so here we are. We're up to our beautiful piece of puff pastry. Now, you don't want your puff pastry to be too hard because otherwise it will crack. So it needs to be bendable. So if it's at the point where it's bendable, it's perfect. Now, it can go too soft. If it's too soft, it's going to be really difficult to maneuver. And if you find that it starts to stretch, then pop it back into the freezer for 5 minutes and bring it out again. All right, so we're going to cut our pastry into 4 pieces. I've turned it over. So my paper is on the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in on itself like that. So you can see that there's a little line. And then I'm going to go the other way just so that it lines up. And I'm going to just press it down. And if it's pliable, it should be okay. It won't crack. Then I'm turning it over so that my beautiful blue paper is on the bottom. Great. So you might be able to see that there is a fold there and a fold there. So very carefully and slowly, you're just going, you might need to put your hand there. We're going to draw a line with our knife. So we've got 4 even pieces. Now I'm just going to release this from the paper just to make it a little bit easier to work with. Right, so we've got our pastry here. Excellent, and all we're doing here is just releasing it from the little blue paper. I'm just putting it on there just so that it doesn't. Great. All right. So it's still there, but we've just lifted it off. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put filling into each little square. Now, what we don't want to do is we don't want to put too much. And do the first one as your test one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this corner, go over to the other corner, and then squeeze it down. It could be a little messy. And if there's any filling poking out, just use your finger to push it back in again. And I'm just using my finger at this stage. Your pastry might be really soft, so we just want to be careful. I'm lifting it up, pushing that pastry in, and then just sealing it up with my finger. Great. And then I'm going to pop it onto my baking tray. Great. So then we'll just keep going with the rest of them. So when you do the first one, you kind of figure out how much filling to put in. We go over the top. Right. Over the top. And then very carefully, and you might need someone to help you lift it up. And we want to put as many on the board as possible. So you might be able to see that I'm keeping it so that I've got a point in the corner, and then I'm running it so that that line and that line match. All right. So we're just filling it up again. It can be a little bit messy. If you're not sure about that, then ask someone to help you. Right. So I've sort of lifted that last one up, and I'm just finding it a little bit easier to do it in my hand, but that might not work for you. And I'm just squeezing. My pastry's getting a little soft, so it's becoming a little bit hard to work with. Right, I'm going to pop it onto my tray. There we go, beautiful. Popping that down. And then the last one here. And you can do as many as you've got filling or as many as you've got pastry. Right, so I'm going to go over the top. That's it, over the top. And then I'm peeling my paper back and popping it onto the tray. Great. Now you can do the rest in your own time, but I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do next. So I've got some olive oil and I've got a pastry brush, and I'm just very lightly brushing. There's lots of oil in the pastry, so what we're wanting to use the oil for is just to give it a little bit of goldenness. So when it bakes, it gets nice and golden. So we just nice and carefully. And then I've got here some sesame seeds. And I'm going, now if you don't like sesame seeds, you absolutely don't have to have them because you are the chef. So you just do what you want to do. So beautiful. And you can use poppy seeds, caraway seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, anything like that, if you don't have sesame seeds. Beautiful. All right, now your oven should be nice and ready to go now. So if you want to bake in the oven for 20 minutes until the edges are nice and golden. And then it says remove tray from the oven using oven mitts. Beautiful. So When you put your tray into the oven, you'll need to use oven mitts, and I suggest that you ask someone else to help you so that you're nice and safe and you don't burn your fingers. And then we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes. For 20 minutes.
All right, so I've taken my beautiful cheese and spinach pastries out of the oven, and they are yum. They are a little bit hot, so you can see I'm using my oven mitt, and they are crispy, they are cheesy, beautiful. All right, fantastic. Now, of course, you can eat them as soon as you take them out of the oven, allowing them to cool, because remember, we've taken them out of an oven that's got 180 degrees. So they are super hot inside. So give them about 10 minutes to cool down. If you want to keep them, like if I've made quite a few, so we're not going to eat them all right now. Before you pop them in the fridge, they need to come to room temperature. So enjoy what you want to enjoy now. And then when they've come to room temperature, you can pop them into a Ziploc bag or into a plastic container, and then pop them into the fridge. And they will last about maybe 3 to 4 days. So beautiful. All right, fantastic. Well, I would love to see a photo of what you've made and pop it up in the Facebook group, and happy eating. All right, bye for now.